Welcome to this Unreal Engine 5 tutorial. Today we're going to talk about the control rig. So let's jump into it. You should be able to search for control rig. And here you have this free project that you can download with this mannequin already set up properly with a bunch of different controls. So if you want to go there and study that, that is where you go and do that. But today we're going to be setting up our own control points just so you see how it is done and talk a little about how they work. So let's start with the first part. To make a control rig you need to have a plugin. You can find it under edit and plugins, and if you search for control rig you'll get this plugin here, which is currently enabled for me. If you click that one in, and then you need to restart, and then you're set up on that front. The next step is to find your skeletal mesh for whatever you want to rig, and you right click on that and you have something called create control rig up here. So just click that and it'll take a little moment and then it'll create a rig for you. So let's open that up. So here we are inside Unreal Engine 5. This is currently the early access build. So if you want to follow along, I guess you would have to have that. Otherwise, if you're further ahead in time, then you might actually have some of these options looking a little bit different, but hopefully you can follow along anyway. So let's talk a little bit about control rig and what it is. So control rig is a way to assist you with manipulating and translating bone data. It's sort of giving you a separate interface towards a mesh, basically. In this instance we're going to be working against the mannequin, but you can use this against any kind of mesh that has a skeletal structure on it, because what you need is a skeletal mesh, and you can set these things up. However, currently in Unreal Engine 5, the early access build, I have been having trouble performing some of these features on some other models than the Unreal Engine mannequin. So there might be some issues currently with that in case you try on different things. But today we're going to be doing some basic things. We're going to be creating some controls for our character by using the control rig. And if you go to the Unreal Engine marketplace, so in here there's a lot of information. We will not be touching on all the different aspects. We will just be keeping it fairly brief, light and easy to begin with. But know that there are multiple different... This resembles a blueprint basically, and it has similarities to it. And it has different modes to it. It has a setup mode, which is sort of like a construction script, a forward solve, which is a way for by creating, this will probably make more sense in a little bit when we start create stuff, but by having controls, the forward solve will calculate what the rest of the mannequin should look like in positions in relation for its different bones, to accommodate for how you have moved the controls. The backward solve is the complete opposite. It is using motions of the bones in the character to find out where are the controls that you've created should be. And backwards and forwards is a solve that runs both backwards and forwards, which is sort of a debug mode, because it by running that one you can sort of see when you have made errors, so your limbs and bones go out of place and look weird, so that's sort of its main feature. Other than that, we have some basic buttons up here. We won't be looking into them too much. We have the classic compile and save up here. We have our viewport, and over here on the right we have our details, and on the left here we have a couple of tabs. You have a blueprint tab, an execution step tab, and a rig hierarchy tab. This is the one that we will be looking and working with for most part of today. So to start off, let's create a control. So what is a control? Well, control you can see as sort of as an attachment or a handle, something that makes it easily accessible for you to manipulate the mannequin in this case, to move it around in different ways. Now, the purpose of doing this is, for the most part, is you can use it for things like animations. You can create animations inside of Unreal Engine if you want to, and it will be easier to do that via a control rig rather than doing it manually in the animation screen, which is very limited. And also it can be used for things like if you already have an existing animation, you can use the control rig to tweak or clean it up or differentiate it in certain ways if you feel like, with more ease than you would be able to do otherwise, which means that you eliminate some, if not all, of the need of having to take animations out of Unreal Engine to a different program, change it over there and bring it back to Unreal. This will make it much more easily available to do those changes inside of Unreal. Now then, our rig hierarchy resembles pretty much how our skeleton looks for our character, but it is not one-to-one because we can add things here that beyond what the skeleton has. So if we wanted to do, for example, which we will be doing today, a control for our hand. So let's find our right hand. So this is our right hand over here. Now to create a control, there's a couple of ways to do that. You can like add a control and then move it around and place it on the specific part of the body, because you want to have the control nearby where it is affecting, so you can sort of at the first glance easily see what it's going to control. But an easier way to do this and to get the positioning right and like that is to actually click on whatever part you want to control in some way. So for us the right hand here, and then you control N and you'll create a new control. Another way to do it would be to right click on the hand and go to the new and choose control over there, and it would give the same result. So now we have this new control and this control space created. So we'll start with renaming the new control to hand right control. And what we'll do after that is we will right click on it and unparent it. Now what this does is it basically just removes it from the hierarchy so it can lie beneath it. And after that we can also remove this control space because we're not going to be needing it for now. So this means that we have now created a control, and the control is in the location of the bone for the right hand. The next part is to create a sort of a gizmo for you to see that you have a control here. And you do that from over here. When you have your control selected, go to the right and you scroll down, you have this gizmo section here. If you click on the gizmo drop down, you get a bunch of selections of how you want the gizmo to look. So if we were to pick, for example, the circle thin, you'll see that it has created a circle now around our hand. Now we might want to have this circle actually be in alignment with our arm. So if we change its rotation on the y-axis by 90 degrees, you'll see that it will now envelop the arm around it. The next part is that this is maybe a little bit big, so we can adjust the size to maybe 0.5 in scale in all axis for this, and you'll see that we have a slightly less intruding circle. So the point of all of this is basically now that we can just click on this control at any point, and then we will have the control available to manipulate. So we can now move the control around and scale and translate and such things. Now if you have done something like that and you just want to reset its position, you just hold down control and press G, and it will reset to the position it had. The next step now is we're gonna actually connect this control to the hand, and we'll do this in two steps. We'll drag out control and choose get control. This will give us a node which represents our control. Now this is a little bit overwhelming maybe at first, but it's fine, I think. It has a type which represents different things, like mostly bone and controls are the ones we're going to be using. It has a name, which is a drop down just for a subset that fits the type it has. Since we only have one control right now, only our hand-right control appears in this list. And then it has a positioning space where it can use its transforms, which is the global and local space. So keep all of these consistent unless you know what you're doing, if you don't want to run into some issues, I would say, just in the beginning at least while learning. The next thing is we want to connect this with our right hand, because we have the position here now, but we're not actually doing anything. So we'll drag our hand R out here and we'll say set transform. Now what this will do is whenever the position of our control changes now, it will send its transform to the hand, and the hand will listen and change its transform as well. So to demonstrate this, if we go in here and we select our control and then we move it, you'll see that our hand moves away. Now this doesn't look awesome because we lose our fingers, but press Ctrl and G to reset, and then you go to this propagate to children checkbox. Clicking that will make sure that all the bones that are beneath the hand R, which includes its fingers, will also be following along if you do a translation like this. So that's the first thing that we need to do. The next thing we want to do is we want to have some kind of a constraint for this arm, because we want it to follow along when we do something with it. So to do that, we'll right click over here. I will type in basic IK, like so. Now here you can connect a chain of bones. So you can say a linkage of bones here should be taken into account for the end bone here, because this last bone over here is the one that's the effector item, the one that's being moved. So for this one we go down and choose hand R, because that is our effector item that we've created this control for. And as a bone above it, we'll just find the hand R here and see what's the bone above it. So that's the lower arm R. So we'll find that here, lower arm R, and above that we have an upper arm R, like so. So now we have created a chain between these. Now you see that the model gets all screwed up, and the reason for that is that it's going in, and if you remove this execution node you can see that it resets. So it's getting screwed up here now because there are some settings that are improper. The first thing we want to do is we want to get our control to affect this, and we'll do that by dragging our transform just like so. We still have issues here with our arm, and that is because it needs a primary and a secondary axis to be input properly. And I've been trying to figure out these, and I have not quite found the answer for it, but these do control what your output will look like in the end, and I think it's somehow related to left, right, up, down sort of thing, but I'm not entirely sure how to interpret this. If you do something like this, if you right click and you type draw hierarchy, for example, then you'll see that, let's do it like this, let's connect the transform over here to the hierarchy and have this basic IK disconnected. Now you'll see that it will make first of all it will show us all the bones by dragging lines, but it will also show us a coordinate system in the form of Z, X and Y for each of the bones. And I do believe that this somehow plays a role, but I still haven't been able to figure out quite how. Anyway, not important. We still can figure this out. If you want to see exactly what it needs to be when it comes to these values, let's hook this up again. You can always cheat and look at the control rig, because in the control rig project it's already set up, right? So there you can see how that works. So if we go in on the primary axis and we change this X from 1 to -1, you'll see that the arm sort of corrects itself. So let's remove the draw hierarchy because it plots so much stuff out here. You'll see that despite having this corrected now, the arm still looks wonky. And we can demonstrate this further by moving this hand. You can see that it's sort of detached and broken still here. So Ctrl G to reset again. Now, part of the problem why it's looking so wonky is because it doesn't know where the elbow is supposed to go. And what you can do is you create another control, and we'll call this right elbow and then underscore PV control. And PV is this pole vector over here, which is a grouping. You can choose to have a direction or a location, and what we're going to be creating is we're going to create a point in 3D space where we're going to say that this this point is where the elbow is supposed to be facing. So if we let's see here, we mark this so we have some kind of gizmo for it so we can see it. We actually get it by our feet right now here, so it's probably a red ball, I think, by default. So let's keep that actually. What we can do is we can change the perspective from, let's do from left, like so. So we want to move it somewhere like that. So it's by the elbow height approximately. Then from that we change to, let's see, front. And then we want to make sure that it's actually behind the elbow, since the elbow should be pointing backwards. So like something like that. Now we can go back to our perspective view. Did I not translate that? Oh, okay. If we do that again, let's see, front, and we'll move it back and up, and then we'll do left, and we'll move it over here somewhere. It doesn't need to be super exact for it to be functional. But then after we've done that, we right click on it and say set gizmo transform from current, so that it's actually saving its position. Then we go back to perspective. And did I pick the wrong one there now? I'm not entirely sure here. We'll see what it looks like, otherwise we'll fix it up. It's gonna be fine. Anyway, so now we're gonna be getting our elbow control, and we're gonna be using its position here. So if we open up this little box here, we get a translation, and we put that as our pole vector, like so. So that's another piece of the puzzle that's in place now, hopefully. It does look like it's a little bit wonky still. Let's see if we can fix this PV control here. And let's reset all transforms. The gizmo is not reset. Set initial transform. Like so. Let's start off with something like this. Now you can see that the elbow is moving. Then when we're up here, we go to set initial transform from... Oh, did I set that one? It should be initial transform. My bad. Anyway, so now we have a direction you can see here that the elbow is trying to align itself with. So we have it somewhere there, it should probably be fine. Okay, now from here, if we take our control for the hand and we start moving it now, you can see that it's moving better for the upper arm, but the lower arm is still a bit broken. Control G to reset that. We also need to make sure that we're propagating to children here now. For this, inverse kinematics is inverse kinematics, in case you do not know, it is sort of the way of figuring out how it's usually used for things like when you place a foot somewhere to make sure that in games there tends to be like when you're standing in a slope that both feet are in the same height despite one of the feet are actually in the air. Inverse kinematics is usually used to make sure that the foot that's in the air instead is placed on the ground, so it looks better. And then inverse kinematics is the calculations of making sure that all the bones that are related to the foot, so that means the chins, the knee, the thigh and everything like that, gets a position that looks good for where the foot is. And that is sort of what we're doing here. We are moving the hand, which is the inverse kinematics, and the arm is following along as best as it can to accommodate for where we want to drag the hand. Yeah, I think that's the best way I can describe it. You can also see it something like if you were to place your hand on the steering wheel of a car, then your elbow might be bent, and if you're rotating your steering wheel to one of the sides, then your arm would sort of follow along. That's also inverse kinematics. But yeah, so here we actually have our first control points, which we can rotate and move around, and we'll have like parts of the body actually conforming to it. Now, this is just a first step, of course. To make use of this, you want to have a bunch of these. You want to have them for like all the hands and arms and elbows and the pelvis and the legs and the feet and things like that. So you have a lot of controls available to you, and you have to set up these relationships between them so that they're actually having these inverse kinematics and the relationships, so it follows along for what the body is able to do. And in the end, the point of doing this, as I said, is to either create or tweak animations and make that more accessible and easier to do inside of the engine. We will not be doing that today, however. This is just going to be covering this part. But I hope this gives a basic understanding of how the control rig works and the different nodes that we have touched on so far. Generally, it's not going to be a whole lot more complex than this. There's things like items and collections and some other fancy things you can do, but it might be a little bit much to begin with. Hopefully you found this video helpful. If you liked the video, leave a like. If you did not like it, leave a dislike. Leave any suggestions or comments you have down below. Subscribe and share this video if you want to see more content like this in the future. That is all for now. Keep on learning. Take care.